All right, wonderful, yes. So yes, I'm Ellen Moore, and this is my book here up on the screen, and I wanted to say thank you to Tehran and also for the Office of Research for making all this possible. So this project started out the way many book projects do. I saw what I perceived to be a rather large gap in the scholarship when it came to how environmental issues in Hollywood are represented. But actually, there were really two gaps that I perceived. And the first was that no one had yet looked at how genre impacts the portrayal of environmental problems in Hollywood. So nobody had done that yet. But the second was I really desired to make more room in what is called critical cultural studies for environmental concern. There has been a lapse in that area, and I really wanted to address, I really wanted to examine how environmental depictions in Hollywood become interwoven with portrayals of ethnicity, sexuality, gender, and class. And nobody had really looked at that as well. So I think it was theoretically ambitious. I certainly hope that I fulfilled that ambition. And so towards that end, in terms of genre, I looked at as many genres as I could. So I looked at action-adventure, superhero films, eco-thriller, animated family films, drama, and westerns. So I looked at sort of as many as I could possibly do in a one single book. And so overall, I found that genre tends to commercialize and flatten a lot of what might be critical messages about the environment. And I also found that, yes, indeed, it was the case that portrayals of ethnicity, gender, sexuality, and class were firmly interwoven with these portrayals of the environment, but maybe not the way that we think. It was certainly not in an environmental justice kind of way. So as I was thinking about giving this talk and thinking about the time constraints, I was trying to find a way to do all that and make it maybe compelling. And the only way I realized I could finally do that was just by reading a page of my book and sort of giving an example. And so the example that I have is from the spy thriller genre, and it is focusing on the Bond film Quantum of Solace. Not the best one, but you know, that was what I had. And it's the one in which Bond, an upper-class white male, finds himself needing to save the people of Bolivia from a man-made water crisis. But he runs up against a billionaire environmentalist who is not what he seems, and in typical Bond style, the scene ends in fiery explosions and the bad guy getting his. But there are obviously deeper issues at stake here, so if you'll bear with me, I'm going to read a little bit of this book and hopefully not bore you too much. So I note that there are two specific portrayals are of note in this movie. First, the only environmentalist, Green, that we as the audience get to know in the film is pathological, homicidal, and elitist. The ersatz nature of his environmentalism is made clear by Green's front company, which is called Green Planet, very subtle, which operates only so that he can grab power and also control major water resources on a global scale. The other characters are supposed to be interested in environmentalism. They're all wealthy donors who show little enthusiasm for environmental issues other than the prominence of their own name. As such, the portrayal of environmentalists is cynical in the film. It's all about profit and feel-good activities rather than real good. Bond himself, as we've already established, is no environmentalist. He acts as he does for the sake of England, not for the Bolivian people or for the environment. Second, regarding environmental technology, we as the audience get a mixed message. Bond, the shameless hawker of countless commercial goods, drives a Ford Edge that supposedly runs on hydrogen power via fuel cells, but even that, 10 years later, is a technology still in the making. Typical for Bond, the car is sleek, reliable, and powerful, and thus seems to be a positive plug for environmentally friendly new fuel technologies. But the almost comically explosive hydrogen tanks that are responsible for the quick and deadly incineration of the eco-hotel he's staying in sends a different message. It only took a vehicle backing into one of the tanks to transform the hotel into a fireball, making fuel cells seem more akin to the much-aligned 1970s Ford Pinto than to a sophisticated technology of the future. Ultimately, it is worthwhile to question what we as the audience are invited to believe about the myriad facets of environmentalism from Quantum of Solace, including the motives of environmental leaders, the feasibility of cleaner technologies, and who should be in control of precious natural resources. Regarding the first, the film encourages us to see those who engage with environmentalism as corrupt and profit-driven. The film also sends quirky messages about what role cleaner technology should play in our lives. But finally, Quantum of Solace implicitly identifies who should be in charge of natural resources. It can't be the Bolivians, who are portrayed as either too immoral or too ignorant to protect it or use it sustainably. In this aspect, the film presents post-colonial fantasies about the need for the British Empire to act decisively on the world stage to protect natural resources on behalf of other countries who are too poor, too disorganized, or too corrupt to do it themselves. As such, while the film provides a clear call to recognize the value of clean water, its portrayals of the Bolivian people serve to, inadvertently or purposefully, marginalize people of color and their potential role in global efforts to address the situation. So I don't know where I am in terms of time, but I suspect I'm, So I can finish by saying that overall what the book finds is that the environment has become a commodity in Hollywood. Studios want to address it. So we see all types of environmental films in all these genres. That's how I was able to do this book. So the environment becomes an appealing topic, but once filmmakers choose to include the environment in their books, they find themselves in a bind, because ultimately Hollywood films are there to make money. And so ultimately the environment becomes kind of twisted. So it's either ends up as saying problem, what problem, as in superhero films, right? Or it ends up starting out rather realistically in children's films, but then ends up on a very utopian note where usually one person, usually a white male, has saved the day. And so ultimately, this is what I found, is that you cannot separate the environment from portrayals of gender, ethnicity, class, and sexuality in Hollywood. Thank you.